So, the Harley Quinn show has been out for a little while now, and I loved the first episode. The show positions itself to be a really funny sitcom about Batman villains with some good feminist messaging, and I was excited to see where that would go. I stopped being excited pretty quickly. What started as little annoyances I was brushing off in that first episode ended up becoming major recurring problems that I have with the show. But it was hard at first to explain, even to myself, why it was bothering me. I actually wrote this script after watching the third or fourth episodes, but I decided to wait until the season finale to see where it went. I haven't really had to change much of what was here. My predictions for it were ultimately pretty accurate, besides some stuff about the Queen of Fables. The only note I'll add here now is that the Joker is revealed to be 25 years old in the finale. I'm 25. Anyway, I realised back then that my issue was that the show is doing what conservatives call virtue signalling, but I don't particularly like that term or how it's used. Virtue signalling tends to come with the baggage that empathy is a lie and people don't really believe in things. Instead, I'll call it performative wokeness. The show loudly claims to hold strong feminist values in the text, but it undermines all of them when it comes to the subtext. So I think I can use the Harley Quinn show specifically to explain a broader trend. Why shows often market themselves around progressive values, not because they're progressive, but because those values are marketable. The main plot lines of Harley Quinn do some good stuff, emphasising the glass ceiling for female characters. This is why the pilot episode was so great. But they don't actually commit to this idea where it counts. Like, they felt the need to give Poison Ivy, a great character, a wacky male sidekick. A plant. They had to take a wacky plant and make him a him. A fucking plant.
You're a strong, independent woman who doesn't care what other people think.
Right! Who cares what Joker and his stupid Legion of Doom buddies think?
Exactly!
Preach!
Because they couldn't just sell us on the Harley Ivy dynamic without him, and he had to be a he. They had to gender a plant.
What's wrong with that?
You see fabulous, I see fugly. You gotta diversify your color palette, woman. Spice that shit up. Add a fun hat.
There's functionally no moment in the entire series, episode 1 onwards, where Harley and Ivy are allowed to hold a scene without the presence of a male character. And they're so aggressive about it that they made one of Poison Ivy's plants a dude and put him in every scene where Harley or Ivy would be alone together. One of the first signs the show isn't sincere about its feminist messaging is when they're too scared to let its female leads be alone together. Once you see that, you see it everywhere. Harley Quinn, the show, can have woke feminist main plots as long as everything else in the show, I'm talking subtext, connotations, aesthetics, everything else in the show has the exact problems that the plotline is calling out. Harley Quinn, the show, keeps saying that Harley Quinn, the character, can't succeed because she's a woman, and that she's getting worse treatment than the Joker just because nobody respects female villains. Only the fact that the show exists at all in this form contradicts that a bit, right? Because it's the Harley Quinn show, not the Joker show. The show establishes the underdog narrative that Harley, the character, isn't as respected as the Joker himself, but that lack of respect is more marketable than the Joker is. So that's what gets emphasised, and that's what gets her a title role. Because of that, the show doesn't work to undermine the narrative that Harley Quinn is less respected than the Joker. It doesn't stress that Harley is just as good a character as the Joker, and it sucks that she gets less recognition. Instead, it fetishizes the idea of Harley being looked down on. It points to the problem because that's what gives it an edge, a gimmick, as something the Joker lacks. But then the Harley Quinn show does everything possible to be a part of the problem it's pointing to. That's why the show constantly has to draw attention to how woke it is, because the wokeness it's peddling is the show's appeal. And because of that, Harley is always a female villain and never just a villain. Female is always legitimized as an other, a modifier, an outlier. And in doing so, Harley Quinn is less substantially feminist than the Sonic Boom TV show.
It all comes down to this one penalty kick. Can the young woman break the glass ceiling and prove once and for all that a female can be just as good an athlete as a male?
You know, Amy, anytime someone calls attention to the breaking of gender rules, it ultimately undermines the concept of gender equality by implying that this is an exception and not the status quo.
The Sonic clip highlights the absurdity here. The show is sinning against itself by not just being about Harley being a cool villain. That isn't to say the show can't point at the glass ceiling, which is real, but that the show can only exist because of the glass ceiling, and all its messaging just reinforces it in subtle and non-subtle ways. Some less subtle sins include having Poison Ivy crush on Kite Man despite him having no redeemable qualities, and his making unwanted sexual advances is presented as charming. And that same episode has a plotline end by having Poison Ivy kiss teenage boys to save their lives, and the joke is how great they think it is. As an aside, the line, "the cure is in my saliva," leads to a much funnier joke, where she spits in a spray bottle after the teenage boys get horny about it. I can't believe they didn't think of that. It's right there. Anyway, what's worse is I wrote crush on back at episode 4, but by the end of the season, Ivy admits to Harley that she's in love with Kite Man. Kite Man continues to be basically irredeemably pathetic, except for one or two highlight moments. On top of it all, every side character introduced is being male, unless the entire point is that they're a woman, and isn't that subversive? Queen of Fables is basically that example. Episode 4 does mention Catwoman, but only to say that she told Poison Ivy Batman waxes everything. Even the decision to bring on Dr. Psycho instead of Giganta to the team feels cruel and deliberate. We see second-rate villains like Clayface, but we don't see any love for characters like Livewire or Cheetah or Talia al Ghul or Blackfire or Roulette. Here I struggle to think of female villains at about this threat level. They exist, but shows like Harley Quinn, the show, won't even name drop them. I grew up on Batman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited, or I wouldn't have even gotten that far. They do show up as background characters in the Legion of Doom episode, but they remain unnamed. It's been suggested to me too that Poison Ivy wouldn't have been included without Batman the Animated Series laying the groundwork for their friendship, and I share that suspicion. Actually, let's hammer on that Dr. Psycho and Giganta thing a bit more. So what happens is Dr. Psycho and Giganta are a supervillain couple, introduced in an episode where Harley's having a bunch of doors closed on her because she's no longer the Joker's girlfriend. Leaving him has ruined a lot of her professional opportunities. Again, the plot addresses the glass ceiling, good. But in this episode, Harley watches Dr. Psycho call Wonder Woman a cunt on live TV. This is a huge gendered slur in the US, Australia not so much, but he has to do PR for it. But he's so misogynistic that he massively fails to do this. His wife then outlines how abusive he is and leaves him on the spot with the cameras rolling. When the main plot of this episode is Harley running into the glass ceiling in the villainy world because she lost her boyfriend's reputation, they never draw the parallel between Giganta and Harley. They don't. Instead, Harley, the character, immediately teams up with Dr. Psycho. Giganta is a character only as far as she's a wife to Psycho and a mother to his son, and that's it. That's what we writers call a satellite character. She's only relevant as far as she's defined by her relationships to male characters. I do not understand how this decision was made, how they looked at this script and went, ah yes, Harley Quinn, the character, must go with Psycho, the cunt guy, yes. And they just ignore the wife when the entire plot is about the intersection of relationships and your work as a villain. Saying it like that, it seems like it has to be intentional, doesn't it? It's bizarre. By the way, the show writers have said that the comic canon lesbian couple won't get together this season because it's too soon. We'll just have Poison Ivy tell Harley how much he loves her, it's totally platonic and they're setting the table and it's totally not queerbaiting at all. That was bad then, but it's worse now that we've had Ivy fall in love with Kite Man. And it's also noteworthy to me to see how it sells itself hard on the overt feminism whilst having 1. Poison Ivy care about a shitty, mediocre meathead who creeped on her. 2. Having default male sidekick character Plant. 3. No, for real. Fuck that Plant. Pisses me off on like 3 different levels. He's not even a fun character, like he's annoying as hell. God, motherfucker. Oh, the show also 4 constantly undermines any female accomplishment by pointing out how unusual it is for women to accomplish things, and 5, not using female characters for any beat where it isn't plot critical that they're breaking the glass ceiling. 6. Queerbaiting, and 7. Teaming Harley Quinn, the character, with the male abuser and making the wife leaving him a punchline and not a character. Which is to say, it's baffling why a show whose creators, Justin Halpern and Patrick Schumacher, seem to hold some genuinely misogynistic beliefs and need to emphasise the feminist messaging so hard. Baffling unless you understand that the messaging isn't sincere, it's profitable. Hold up, actually, I've got a last minute note. Watching back on this, I think part of the reason definitely has to be in recontextualizing sex appeal. I hadn't noticed until I'd seen the shots in quick succession like this, just how much of the show is dedicated to tight shots of Harley's hypersexualized look, or to sexualize Poison Ivy, which they especially did in the finale. I think a lot of the feminist messaging allows men like Halpern and Schumacher to try to push a lot of sex appeal onto the show, while trying to recontextualize it as empowerment. And if that's true, that's really gross, and that idea is going to really bold and underline a lot of what I originally had down. Compare this to the Bojack Horseman creator, who was already addressing this 4 years ago.
The thinking comes from a place that the cleanest version of a joke has as few pieces as possible. For the dog joke, you have the thing where the tongue slobbers all over the business person. But if you also have a thing where both of them are ladies, then there's an additional thing and it muddies up the joke. The audience will think, why are those characters female? Is that part of the joke? The underlying assumption is that the default mode for any character is male, so to make the characters female is an additional detail on top of that. In case I'm not being 100% clear, this thinking is stupid and wrong and self-perpetuating unless you actively work against it, and I'm proud to say I mostly don't think this way anymore. Sometimes I still do, because this kind of stuff is baked into us by years of consuming media, but usually I'm able, with some help, to take a step back and not think this way.
Harley Quinn, the show, does not make the same effort. Shows like Harley Quinn will tell you that being in the audience, participating in this is an act of rebellion against the patriarchy. It's a form of participating in the change you want to see in the world. It's not just a product, it's part of your activist identity. It's transgressive. But when you think about that, that's only slightly less offensive than that one Pepsi ad. Ideally, if they don't actually offend the sensibilities of their market-tested demographics, they'll make a quick buck from selling this idea. But the truth is, Harley Quinn, the show, does nothing but tell you that this is what progress looks like while committing the same sins it's supposed to be addressing. Shows like Harley Quinn, the show, will claim to be an ally because it helps them get your time and money. But when that's all they care about getting from you, and that's the relationship they have with their audience, it shouldn't be surprising when they seem resentful of their own message. At its most cynical, your values are just seen as personality traits that can be exploited for profit. And that's important, because what it comes down to is that the same corporate entities behind Harley Quinn, the show, are the ones that cancelled Teen Titans when it had too many girls in the audience. It's important because DC's biggest competitor, Marvel, took 20 movies to give a female superhero a title role in Ant-Man and Wasp, and 21 to carry a lead role in Captain Marvel. And of course, Captain Marvel committed all the same sins I'm talking about here too, in its own way. It's important to remember why it is that way. Let's get back to why Teen Titans, the show, got cancelled because too many girls watched it. Teen Titans, and according to Paul Dini, Tower Prep, got cancelled because it got girls mixed into its boy-targeted demographics. And rather than take that as a sign of quality or the expanded audience as a win, it got the show cancelled for complicating the merchandising. Meaning there's a blue aisle and a pink aisle at the toy store, and they're like that for a reason. And the toy companies attached to these shows don't like it when the colours get mixed because it makes selling ads in those shows' time slots too complicated. It's generally accepted that it's not worth the work to appeal to girls too, which is also one of the reasons that Marvel keeps Black Widow out of a lot of Avengers merchandise. So, when presenting good values and messaging isn't profitable, and bad messaging presented as catering to your values is profitable and a good marketing gimmick, maybe we come to the idea that the reason we can't really have the media we want is because of the profit motive. And until we address that, we need to keep in mind that chances are, if the show you're watching is profitable, it's probably not that progressive. Anyway, here's that fucking Pepsi ad.